Welcome to video 3 of our Sharing Perspective series, where we are highlighting dyslexic rights, dyslexia rights, and today we are talking about the right to support. We're delighted to be joined by Keith and Ivanna and Dylan again, and in this video we're really talking about the types of things that make a difference in education, in school, in work, about what types of supports, or sometimes we talk about accommodations, can really help someone with dyslexia. I might come to you first, Dylan, because obviously being identified very early in your primary school career, you probably accessed a lot of supports. Could you maybe say what you found most helpful and how that kind of impacted on you?
Yeah. So as I was identified as dyslexic in kind of first and second class, I was kind of starting to receive support, for kind of catching up or so with the classwork at the time. Once I then was kind of formally kind of diagnosed as well, I think the first initial thing, which there's debates for or against it, I stopped kind of learning Irish, and that's basically allowed kind of time to free up in the day for me to receive them supports without losing any more kind of class time. After this, then it was recommended to me, and I went with my assessments, and the school was excellent. The support I received, that I applied to St. Patrick Macaulay's, which is a designated reading school. So it basically works on a 2-year program. So you leave your current primary school and you actually attend the school then fully for 2 years. You do everything as normal as you would in a traditional primary school. However, there's just a lot more emphasis kind of on literacy and numeracy and supporting and developing tools for dyslexic students. My experience was excellent. Sometimes the leaving your primary school can be daunting, but you're in the same boat as everyone. You go there and you're in a small class size environment, and everything is tailored for dyslexia students. So I learned a lot of skills there, and I think, reflecting back now as an adult, I learned a lot of skills without even realizing there. Afterwards, then returned to primary school, and continued with kind of that support kind of within the classroom as much as possible from the classroom teacher, because the classroom teacher, once they're aware of your needs, like, will try assess accommodate you, sorry, during the day, and then also then additional kind of reading outside the class. In second level education, then I kind of continued through, and I received kind of support kind of during that Irish, and I didn't actually do a third kind of language either. I didn't do a foreign language, so I was able to receive time there. That was also kind of a mixture of kind of language support, subject support, but sometimes in the day, this it's a lot more difficult for dyslexic people in the classroom. And I nearly needed that mental break as much as anything, as much as the support I was receiving that was helping me kind of keep up with my classwork and my studies and understand my classwork and studies. It was just that mental break of maybe leaving the classroom or just taking some time during the day. And I think that's the side we have to look at it as well, is the effort it takes for dyslexic people within the classroom. And it can be so overwhelming. I think it's an element of support that we do have to recognize. And it's not just like a DOS, maybe 20 minutes of sitting there and coloring or doing some meditation or just having a cup of tea with a teacher. That can actually mean that if I return to the classroom, I might be able to focus then for the next 2 to 3 hours much better.
That's really interesting. And that sort of effort and that potential for fatigue,
Mm.
because dyslexic students are often working harder than other students, although you sometimes, it goes back to what we talked about in the video. I think Ivana said it's often a hidden issue because you're not walking about with a big D on your forehead. Ivana, did you find that in second level that there was a effort and tiredness aspect because you were putting all that extra effort into studies?
Absolutely. I think my experience in school would have been different from Dylan. So I would have gone through the majority of my school years without having that assessment. So I didn't have supports tailored to me until leaving cert really was the first time that I had those supports. So I think definitely there was some fatigue and tiredness because I'd kind of built up my own strategies of trying to cope with the fact that I was dyslexic, not really realizing it. Some of those probably nearly negative until I had that assessment, because I would change my answers, like I mentioned before. I wouldn't write something if I wasn't confident with my grammar or my spelling in it, which meant that I wasn't really then achieving my full potential that I could have had. So then when I did have that assessment and I had more supports available to me, I was able to have a spelling and grammar reliever, which made me then more confident when I was writing my answers that, you know, if I have a letter or two wrong in this answer, that, you know, that's going to be taken into account. Or if there's a piece of my grammar here in this that isn't 100%, that I won't be docked marks, or I didn't have to worry about not achieving the same marks that I maybe deserved for an answer just because my spelling or my grammar wasn't 100% accurate. I did do Irish in school. I actually went to a Gael class, so I love the Irish language and I feel very strongly about the Irish language. I say kind of now it's funny, you know, if I did have the assessment earlier, I wouldn't have probably taken Irish because that's commonly, you know, you don't do Irish or you may not do a third level language. But I am happy that I did do Irish. I think it definitely can be a big struggle, especially written Irish. Spoken Irish, I still, even to this day, would feel a lot more confident about. But if I had to write something in Irish, that would definitely give me a lot more anxiety, or I'd find that a lot harder. And just even the kind of phonics of pronouncing something in Irish would be a bit more difficult for me. So I definitely would have made more mistakes when I was learning Irish in school with regards to that. And then I didn't take my third language, so I would have studied French, but I didn't end up actually sitting it then in the Leaving Cert because that would have been one of my weaker subjects, obviously. But I think definitely having that assessment and having the awareness even of my teachers, so they had more of an understanding then how come, you know, my languages weren't potentially as strong as some of my other subjects. So that was brilliant as well. And then even for, let's say, my examinations, I had some extra time when I was sitting my exams for Leaving Cert. So that was brilliant because it gave you more time to read the question. So, you know, I think people always tell you, make sure that you read the question correctly when you're trying to answer something. So it gave me that extra time to make sure that I was comprehending what I was reading and that I was actually answering what was asked of me. I do think it's very tailored though. So I know, let's say, other people would have had different supports than what I would have had. And everyone, as you mentioned earlier, is on a spectrum. So some people would have had, let's say, additional resources outside the classroom. I would have been in the classroom for all of my resources. And then other people have additional supports with their examinations. So I had access to a reader, and some people have a scribe. So it really does depend. And I think that is really important, that the supports are tailored for each student because everyone will be different and everyone's needs is different. So as far as kind of possible, I think it is better to have it individualized. And that's how you're going to get the biggest kind of benefit for that student.
Yeah, I think, sorry, just even on that, you know, the second level supports, and because I received my diagnosis so early, I was able to avail of them supports, you know, for my junior cycle and for my leaving certificate exams. And likewise, I received the spelling and waiver grammar and the additional time, and it took such a pressure off me. You know, maybe because it would take me longer to read the paper, I also had a reader to assist me in the exam. So all of them, you know, gave me that extra footing that I needed, you know, that just put me, you know, put you on par with other students. You know, it's not anything extra we're receiving. It's just it's enabling us to maybe to be fair in the game with other students. And it's vital then with assessment, you know, assessment is needed to avail of them, as well as then moving into higher level education. I did go for the DARE scheme as well, so you can apply for the disability route. I forget what the letters stand for, but into education, so you can apply for going into third level education for like a reduced point entry, and you take that into consideration.
We'll put some notes in underneath the video for the DARE scheme, I think, with links to, so if people want to know more about that, but it's really helpful to mention that. Just before we maybe move to Keith and talk about third level maybe supports, would you suggest, Dylan, that we're getting all the supports right in second level? Because now you're the professional teacher there, you've got control over some aspects of the young people you work with. In terms of the system, do you think we're identifying young people, they have that understanding, they have the right supports early enough? Do you think we're there and we maybe need to close our doors at the Dyslexia Association because we're getting everything right?
No, unfortunately, I wish you could say, yeah, there'd be no need. But unfortunately, in a previous video, I highlighted, say, the absence of, even for the initial teacher education, the lack of understanding and the lack of teaching, the lack of learning we actually do on additional on dyslexia as becoming a teacher. Seeing that, just highlighting one point, that maybe that the teachers themselves aren't even comfortable on how to best assist a dyslexic student. And it's nearly left up to teachers themselves to go and study, continue with their own professional development to then focus on that. But it should be mandatory, because everyone in education and everyone across the board should have a certain level of understanding of dyslexia, but then also how to identify, but then also how to support as well. And I think that's where the Dyslexia Association really bridges them gaps, and it assists everyone from every corner, from from students to parents to people who think they might be dyslexic to people who need to get assessments. And I think that's what it's such a vital place that people can go for that support.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think the Dyslexia Association of Ireland, they also have a Dyslexia and Me workshop. And that focuses on building resilience and working on self-esteem. Because I think commonly when you can think of supports that you may be able to offer someone with dyslexia, you do think of, let's say, the reader, a scribe, kind of additional time or resources outside the classroom. But focusing on how it can affect maybe someone's confidence or their self-esteem in school isn't something that initially pops to your head when you're trying to think how you can help someone. And I think that's equally as important. I know myself in school, I used to feel really anxious around reading in class. I'd feel sick, I'd excuse myself to try and go to the bathroom so I wouldn't be asked to read aloud. I'd be nervous about having to do that, or about spelling something wrong or pronouncing something wrong. And, if people laugh or make fun of you if you make a mistake, it's never nice. And that can absolutely knock your confidence. I think if you have the identity of being dyslexic, or even without having that identity, it can equally knock your confidence. I think for me, especially because I wasn't aware that I was dyslexic, it really knocked my confidence because I didn't know why that was happening. So I think it would be great to try and have more supports in place from that point of view as well, to try and help people kind of feel more comfortable about the fact that they are dyslexic, and to try and help it not affect their confidence. And to try and speak about it is normal, that you are going to feel a bit anxious maybe sometimes when you're learning, or you might feel frustrated, or you might feel annoyed that you're not picking things up as quickly as your peers, or you might feel upset. Sometimes I go home and I'd be crying from school because I'd be upset about what could have happened maybe that day in school when I was learning. And so I think it is really, really important to speak about that aspect, and to try and get more supports in place as well from that point of view with dyslexia.
Yeah. And I think even for the esteem, like I'm personally, I teach geography and business. And I actually, even today, I said to one of my students who I was supporting today, who actually is dyslexic, she was trying to write an answer and she's like, oh, well, I won't write that. And I was like, look, you're not actually writing an English essay here, and that's what I tried to get across to my students is we need coherence. I'm promoting for my students to write the best quality, increasing their literacy skills. But even by just saying that simple statement to her, it gave her the confidence to say, oh, well, I will write down my ideas. She's not going to be judged for that. And I think, that's across all your subjects, as well as then with English or with your subjects, if you do receive the support, such as the spelling and waiver, the spelling and waiver grammar can also then support your confidence with that.
That's great. I mean, it sounds like you've encouraged a sort of safe risk taking there in that student that they might
Yeah,
not
I
have
think
had.
that was kind of partly me sharing my experience, and I have to say, it's like, look, I went and I got an A1, or H1 in geography, and I bet you the amount of spelling mistakes in that, in them essays, or the coherence might be lacking there as well. But I think it is possible, and it's because I was passionate about geography. I knew the content, I studied my ways, and I was able to demonstrate that. And I think that's what I push across with my subject. I'm saying you don't have to be an A1 student in English, to do really, really well in geography and kind of put it across.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Keith, what could you say something about supports maybe and how they might be a little bit different in third level and touching on the points that Ivana and Dylan have raised?
Yeah, so I mean, I found out when I was in third level myself, and I went to Maynooth University, and they have a fabulous access office there, and they do offer a range of supports. I'm in TU Dublin now, and the same. Up in Tallaght, we have brilliant access office and access officers. But I think again, we're back to funding, we're back to awareness. We have lots of supports. We have a package with a little group of things that we offer as supports: extra time, readers, scribes, individual rooms, smaller rooms, and stuff like that. And I mean, I received the extra time, and I received the smaller room, which for me was massive because I don't know how other people go, but I mean, I was in a room with maybe three, four, 500 people doing an exam, and although it's silence, actually the silence is killing because you hear things creaking and everything else, and it's so distracting. And you have people beside you, and you're wondering, are they looking at your stupid writing or whatever else? So there's loads of this stuff goes on. Where in the smaller room, it was brilliant. I was kind of by myself, and I was able to do it. The extra 5 minutes per hourly exam doesn't seem like much, but it helped me just decide from questions and do things like that. I was offered a scribe, like a typist, but I didn't do it because I was embarrassed about saying things. Was I saying it right and all? Because this was early stages of me knowing. So I could have availed of that, but I didn't because I find how I do it is when I write, I can then get it out. So my act of writing it down, or I type everything now, I type it on the computer. When I start to do it, it gets my thinking going. It's a bit like when I talk, it takes me a while to talk, but as you've noticed, once I start, it sometimes doesn't stop. But again, I think two things. We don't have enough money and we don't have enough awareness. So within, just like Dylan says, like I say that we have to create a learning environment, a teaching and learning environment that students feel safe in, and they feel safe and confident enough to speak. So I would never make anybody speak in a class because when I was young, that was my crux. They made me speak French with my thick Dublin accent, and it was a horrendous experience. So we have this kind of idea as well in teaching that we should encourage everyone to speak, because we're supporting them in public speaking, integrating with the class, joining in with their peers, joining the debate or the discussion, and we're not leaving them out. Whereas actual fact is the worst thing you can do. And I've done research on this, and I'm in the process of producing a paper. And it actually leads a student into what I would say academic imprisonment, because they suppress their own voice because of the fear of looking stupid when they talk. So you have to create a space where they feel confident to do that, as opposed to that. Now, that's a support that's not offered, that's not there, but like educators will offer that if they know about it. So we raise the awareness of these things. I think we need a lot more supports. We need a lot more staff in third level. We don't have the resources. Head has done research. I've looked at it myself. We have a massive increase of maybe 60% of students presenting with all types of disabilities. But the biggest one is actually dyslexia. It's kind of the most popular one, if you want to say. But yet we have a massive reduction of something like 46% less resource people. So we've twice as many people presenting and nearly half as many staff trying to handle it. And people are taking it on themselves. I mean, I can resonate with what Dylan is saying. I'm sure he does the same. Like I do it myself. I see it. I want to help the person. And it's up to you. You're left as the resource, even though it's technically part of your job, but it's not either. The stuff should be in place.
Yeah.
So I think we have great supports, but we're a long way from there. We need a lot more in place. And again, it goes back to the beginning. If we catch the intervention early,
Mm.
a lot of these problems don't arrive by the time they get to second, or if they even go to third level. If we have the educators in teaching college and we educate them about a student with dyslexia in your class, what does it look like? What do you think they need? All the range of supports that's available. And we educate them, then they can bring the awareness back in as well. So, we talked about the first thing and the second thing, and we're at the third thing, but it's all interlinking. If you get early intervention, by the time you get to this stage of looking supports, the supports are less, and you've got them in place yourself, and you don't if you need them down the line. But I think, yeah,
It almost
do you
sounds
think?
like knowing you're dyslexic, which was the topic of our first video, and then being confident about what that means and having that as part of your identity means you can almost take advantage of those supports. Because
Yes.
sometimes people think if you provide the supports, why do you need the word or the assessment or the identity? Surely the supports are enough. What would you say to people who said that? That if you just provide supports, you don't need part one and part two.
I think
Well,
for
I mean,
that, I was sorry, I was down in UCC, so I attended UCC for college, and I was speaking to the DSS, so the Disability Support Service, and dyslexia would be under that section for the supports that are offered down there, and they mentioned that some people won't sign up with the Disability Support Service down there. So even if those supports are in place, if someone hasn't accepted their identity of being dyslexic or don't have that identity, they might not sign up with that service to then receive those supports. So that's why I think it is so important. So for whatever reason, maybe some people mightn't be aware, then other reasons some people are a little bit embarrassed to sign up to get those supports. So I think having that identity and accepting that identity then leads to you being able to get those supports. So if you're missing that second step, that's going to inhibit you being able to receive the best quality education when you are going to college. So I think all three steps are equally as important as each other.
I agree fully with you there as well, because I think the identity and acceptance is a massive part. And what you said is 100% true, because even I've done research on it, ahead have done research on it. First year, some of the biggest reasons for failure in first year in college is because students don't identify with the access office to take on the supports, because they don't want to be different than their friends. They don't want to be identified or labeled as different. So again, the word dyslexia has certain connotations to it, certain connections to it, which are false. So as a younger person getting that intervention early, they're able to accept. I mean, the biggest thing for me was accepting that I had it. The minute I accepted I had it, I just like exploded to the world. I grew. I wrote about it with my own participants in the research. They called it the coming out moment. The moment where you tell the world, yeah, I have dyslexia. So what? It's me. That's part of me. And we went through this kind of coming out ceremony, and they spoke about when they went home, their families noticed this difference about them, a little bit more confidence, because they accepted this part of them that they had. And that's massively important. And I think, for me, from my experience, I'm older than everybody here, so I've had a lot more life experience of, what that word meant. And it was all wrong. And now I'm trying to advocate for that awareness to come in. But if I had known much younger, then I look back at the struggles I've had in life, and I know I'm not alone. I know there's so many people my age younger, and even kids or teenagers who have had these struggles. I mean, frustration, trying to do things, the amount of time it takes. I mean, like, it takes me forever to write anything. I think about it like for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it puts so much pressure on people. Now, we have a writing centre, and they had it in Maynooth as well, and it's a fabulous resource where you can go to the writing centre, you can learn how to reference, you can learn how to do all these third level things. That kind of, when you don't do, identifies you as different, and you get the slagging about, oh, you can't do Harvard or whatever. So I think people need to accept they have it, and they need to accept that these are the things that might challenge them, and these supports are available. So
Mm,
you're right, students aren't accessing the supports, but that's because they still feel different
mm.
or disabled, or this social stigma that's attached to it as well.
I
So
think
we go right back to the beginning, right back to the middle, and back to where we are now. Raise the awareness, educate the educators, get the word out there, keep the word out there. Don't be putting the word in other things, because everything's getting mishmashed instead of it being what it is. It's not just a learning disability.
And I think when you get, as we're going back even to the start to saying accepting your dyslexia, you're kind of unlocking your potential then. I think once you unlock your
Yes.
potential, then you can use that kind of going forward. And then relating it then back to the supports, is with the educators being able to identify this, it kind of supports the whole model of the inclusion of supports. So the inclusive support of assisting the whole classroom. And that's kind of an area that kind of really interests me, because you're also then supporting those that might be undiagnosed of dyslexia as well within the classroom, as well as them tailored outside the classroom support. So the inclusion versus exclusion debate for support is a big one. If students should be receiving their support outside the classroom, but I think it's just a well-needed kind of balance that needs to be there. But for the balance to work, the educators need to have them skills and be confident in them skills first.
And I think I
Yeah,
saw
and I
it.
mean,
Sorry, Keith, after you.
no, sorry, I was just going to say, like the classroom environment, when you go into a classroom with dyslexia, and particularly third level, 'cause there's so many people in, and they're generally not your friends in fourth year, because you're coming from all different places and schools, etc., etc. And you go into this, like, it's massively intimidating. You feel really intimidated, and you sit in the environment and you're seeing all this new language. I mean, I studied anthropology, and it's a whole new language that you have to learn, all these different words. And it's so intimidating and scary and frightening. And then, like, I think what I always do, and I think a lot of people are doing it now, but I think it should be nearly mandatory. This idea that we hang on to the PowerPoint till the morning of the lecture, and then we produce this big document with lots of text, which is another scary moment, with words we never seen, with sentences that by the time I used to hear the fourth sentence, by the time we worked out what was meant, the third sentence was said and I was lost. So I always release the slides and the PowerPoints and the handouts and the articles a few days earlier. So if a student wants to have a look at it, they can familiarize themselves. And this is a great asset for a dyslexic student. They can look at the PowerPoint, they can familiarize the word, they can get to the dictionary and find out what that word means. So when they see the word, they don't panic, they don't try and understand it. They've already seen it. It's not new to them. And I find that really helps them. And I'm always getting feedback to try and improve. And that's one of the things they all say that really helps them, is the materials released early so they can access it if they want. And I don't make them speak in class.
Something you said, Keith, earlier, I think you said, it doesn't seem like much, but for me it was massive. So something like a support like that, providing something a little bit in advance, for a non-dyslexic person, they might think, I don't see why that's such a big deal. But I was going to say, when Dylan said the phrase unlocking potential, everyone nodded, because it was about, the supports are about and perhaps as we come to a close to this video, I'm thinking, if you are going to unlock that potential, there's almost three keys, aren't there? There's the assessment key, the identity key, and the supports key, and all sound to be equally as important as each other, as each one.
Absolutely. And just going back to what Dylan said about, it's these type of small things that are massive level the playing field. It makes it the same for everybody. Like, we're not getting an extra handout. It's not giving us an extra 5% in our essay because this happened. It's just making us able to access it in a different way or the same way as you. It levels the entire playing field. And I've noticed whatever I do for someone who I think has dyslexia, it's the same for a non-dyslexic person. Like, if we teach non-dyslexic people all of the time, we exclude the dyslexic people. But when we teach to be inclusive for dyslexic people, everyone is included. We're not excluding anybody. Students who don't have dyslexia are able to look at the slide and go, "Oh yeah, that's what that word means." They must be intimidated and scared and the whole lot as well. So, but it's very small thing, but it is massive help. So, sorry.
Yeah, I agree with that point 100%. I was going to mention that as well, that, when you're giving those slides to the students earlier, you're not just helping people that are dyslexic that are taking the course, you're helping everybody in the course. You're making it easier for everybody. And I think, when educators are teaching students, if they're using different learning strategies and different teaching strategies, that's beneficial to everybody. You know, you don't have to be dyslexic to have struggles or difficulties in school. So if we're reviewing how we're educating young people, and if we're improving how we're educating them, that's helping everybody, you know, dyslexic, non-dyslexic people. So I think it could never be seen as a negative, because, you know, that's just going to benefit everybody in a classroom setting.
Keith,
Exactly.
Ivanna, Dylan, thank you very much for all your contributions. This has been the third video where we've talked about the right to supports, but I've just learned so much from our discussions over talking about the right to assessment and the right to identity, the right to supports, and how those all link together. And my takeaway little phrase for today is definitely unlocking potential, which I think just sums up a lot of our discussions quite nicely. So thank you so much for your time and joining us over the course of these 3 videos.